Okay, so the previous video was a little bit more of a lecture than a tutorial, but hopefully now you have a deeper understanding of what you are learning and the context of it. And now we are going to move into the next phase, and I'm really excited because we are like just a few videos away from covering things like actual 3D modeling techniques, materials, textures, and much more. However, before we graduate kindergarten and get rid of the training wheels, we still have a couple things that need to be covered. And those things are reviewing the properties panel and talking about primitives. So the properties panel is like the core of Blender. Most things go through it. So we won't cover all of it in one go. In fact, this will be a first pass. We will just cover the things that you should know immediately, the essentials that you need to get started. And only after, as we get through things, you will see how they show up in the properties panel and how you, in fact, edit properties from there. Okay, so to get started, the first thing we need to understand of the properties editor or properties panel is that it is partially responsive. And what I mean with that is that everything you see all the way down to this orange square icon is gonna stay the same no matter what you have selected, although it's gonna be relative to the object that you have selected. For example, this one is showing me information about the wall because now I have selected the wall. But if I change typology of object, and right now I have a mesh selected, say that I select the camera, you will notice that everything below the object is responsive and kind of tied to the typology of thing that you have selected. So right now I have a camera, so I have access to properties about the camera. If I select a light, now I have properties that are relative to the light. Okay, we're gonna start at the top. And so the very first one is the tool tab. Now the tool tab, all that it does is that it shows you what you already know from the end panel, and it's showing you the exact same thing. Moving on is the render tab, and we will have a whole section dedicated to mastering rendering and rendering techniques, and that's when we will cover most of this tab. And the next one, the output, you have already encountered when you did your first 3D animation. Some of it you have already tinkered with, like the resolution of the output, the percentage of the output. And just to review a few more things, you have things like the frame rate, which is the speed at which the playback is going through. So every 24 frames, a second will elapse. And you have some presets here, the most commons being 30 and 60. Then you have the frame range, which you already tinkered with also when you did your first 3D animation, although you edited these properties directly from the timeline. And a few more things of relevance are the output section, where you can pick the directory of where you're going to save your renders, as you already know. The file format, so you can save still images or movies. Moving on, we have a tab which is called View Layer. This one also we will cover in the future as it relates to the layer that you can create in compositing. Compositing is basically a way of creating your final output as a series of layer, as a series of cutouts. You can think of them as cutouts. And then that allows you to stack them together with more freedom. In other words, there are options in this tab that allow you to do some fancier manipulation of the final image. And then finally, the scene tab. Now this one is important because within it, you have the units section, which allows you to switch between metric and imperial system. But most importantly, it allows you to change the units of length. This is the option that you will change most often. In fact, by default, it is set to meters, but I changed it to centimeters in the free project template because it allows you for a little bit more precision. Moving on, we have a tab about the world. This one, you will see that it has information, of course, about the world, which right now is displaying the fact that we have an HDRI active and set. If you remember from previous videos, an HDRI is like the visual information of the environment surrounding your scene. And from here, you can control not only the visuals, as in what shows up in the reflections, for example, but also information about the lighting. So for example, if I set this to 0, the global illumination of the environment will be 0. And now we have a much more dramatic lighting because only that of our sun is coming true. Moving further, you have a tab about collections that you will mostly never touch, and one about the object, the selected object, which displays the exact same information that you already know from the end panel. So if I select Suzanne, you can see that it's synced because it's displaying the exact same information. Now, something new that you can learn from here are delta transforms, which are sort of additional values that you can use. There might be rarely situations where you might need to have something at a specific location in space, and then you may want to move those things around while the value that is displayed in its own location, rotation, or scale, for example, stays the same. If it sounds complicated, it's because this is for like extreme cases. So rare, in fact, that it's kind of hard to give you a tangible example, but it might be that, for example, you have something zeroed out like this floor, and maybe something is attached to these values, and it's important that those values stay zeroed out. But then at the same time, you really need the floor to be, I don't know, let's say 10 centimeters higher. So the delta allows you to make those changes while at the same time keeping the default values zeroed out. Now, moving further, as we've said before, you have tabs that are responsive to the kind of object that you have selected. Most of the time, you will have meshes selected, and so the next one with this branch is the modifiers tabs. Now, as the name implies, modifiers modify things, and there are a whole lot of them. And eventually, we will get to cover the most essentials. In fact, pretty soon in this phase, we will learn about the basic few modifiers that you need to start modeling. Right now, I have a subdivision modifier on Suzanne, which all it's doing is making the mesh kind of denser and smoother. And so regularly Suzanne looks like this, but now thanks to this modifier, it looks way nicer. The next few are the particles and physics and constraints, which are far more advanced, and we will not cover them for some time, but eventually we'll get there when you have solid foundations. And then we have the last two, which are the data, which contains information like the name of the mesh, vertex groups, shape keys, UV maps, which again, as you notice, as we go down, things are getting more advanced. And all of these are additional information that is attached to every mesh and that we will get to cover in this next phase. Last but not least, the material, which of course contains all the information about how an object that has this material assigned behaves and responds to lighting and the environment and the other objects. In other words, how it looks when it gets rendered. As you can guess by now, if you select the camera, you have information about the camera, like information about its lens and focus and so on. And the same is true about lighting. So each light will have its own tab, and as you will see very soon, there are different types of light. Now, once again, this was just a very light first pass at the properties editor. As you might have realized, being that all the core functionalities of Blender pass through this editor, there are several tabs that are tied to advanced things that we have not covered yet, but we'll cover soon. And so the takeaway for the moment is simply that at this stage, you know a whole lot about the 3D viewport, a whole lot about the outliner, and have at least a basic grasp of what the properties panel is and does, which is starting to give you an almost complete understanding of the default layout as you have met it when you first opened Blender. Now, before we wrap things up, here's something that you can actually learn today that is not advanced, and in fact that we're gonna cover right now, and that are primitives. Primitives are the basic shapes, the building blocks that you can use to create meshes. The hotkey that you need to learn is Shift S, which will open this pie chart, and if you right click to get away with it, the most important one and most useful is Shift A, which will open the add. So Shift A as in add, and we'll open this drop down menu with a whole lot of things. And right now we're gonna just take a look at the number one, meshes. So this mostly is self-explanatory. So if you click on cube, guess what? A cube will appear in your scene, and you will see it will be selected and will not have any material assigned to it, so it will look white. You will have in the bottom left corner a tab, and before you click away, you can enter values in here to change where it's showing up. And right now I sent it to the moon. And then another thing that you should notice is that right now I have brought it up by 100 centimeters. That is referring to its origin, okay? And if you notice, when it first appeared, it was created where the 3D cursor is. Had the 3D cursor been in some other place, when I create a cube, it will appear over there. So that is another thing about the relationship between origins, pivot points, and the 3D cursor. Obviously, as you add meshes, they start to be synced also in the outliner. And like I've mentioned before, a good habit is to rename them as you make them. By pressing X, you can delete them. And once again, I'm gonna select this and press X to delete it. And to point out the importance of renaming things, what you see here are 3 spheres. And had I not renamed them, I would not know which one is which. But because I've named them, obviously true white is gonna be the white sphere. Now, little pro tip, if you have been wondering all of this time why there are 3 spheres in our scene, this is something that you will see very common in 3D scenes and 3D worlds as a set of objects that will not figure in the final render, but as you work through the scene, it will help you maintain a consistent lighting that is not too dark or not too bright, or in more technical terms, not overexposed or underexposed. Now, before we wrap things up for real, I'm gonna show you something that not everybody knows. And that is that additionally to these meshes, which are the basic primitives that you can sort of summon in your 3D scene, it is possible to go to Edit, Preferences, Get Extensions, type in Extra, and under Available, what you will see is something called Extra Mesh Objects. If you install this, this is like a plugin, an add-on to Blender. And what this allows you to do is to have some extra objects in the menu that you have seen before. So what I will do here is Shift S and select 3D cursor to word origin, which is going to reset the 3D cursor that we moved just before. Just to review a few more commands, I'm also gonna select and Shift select the monkey and its pedestal and press H to get them out of the way, and then Shift A, and now you see that we have a lot more options. Some of the most interesting are gears if you're doing mechanical stuff, so you don't have to model gears from scratch. And as you create them, you will have technical specs over here that you can change. Pipe joints, another really tedious thing to do by scratch. And if you are into jewelry design, gemstones, because it's really annoying to have to do this from scratch, right? Okay, so this sums it up for this video. And to quickly review, we covered a first pass on the properties editor. So now you know something about every single editor that is featured in the default layout. And then I introduced you to primitives and also to some extra objects, some extra primitives that are kind of hidden away and not everybody knows about them. So I invite you to explore the different primitives, try to place them around, see what is what, and very soon we're gonna start doing our own 3D modeling, and that's when you will become very familiar with most of them as they become the building blocks of what you're trying to create. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.